Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share it with your family and friends. I got a nice message from Joan from Minnesota. She sent me an email. She wrote, I love the America's Founding Series, but I have to ask, out of all the time periods in our history, why do you place so much emphasis on our founding? Now, Joan, first of all, thank you for the kind words. Thanks for listening. Always enjoy the feedback I get from the audience. And the reason that I focus on the founding is because it's a blueprint for our nation. It shows how our system was designed to limit power, protect liberty, and rely on the idea of an engaged citizenry. The principles of limited and self-government, the lessons from that period are timeless, and they help us understand where we've gone off track today. See, our mission here at the P.A.S. Report is simple. I want to pull from the shadows those forgotten patriots whose sacrifices laid the bedrock of American freedom. We don't talk about the textbook heroes every week. We talk about the men and women whose character defined our nation, the ordinary people, their stories that remind us self-government only survives when citizens are engaged, when they are informed, and when they're willing to shoulder of responsibility, not just pawn everything off to the government. And sadly, our education system has failed to teach these basic principles. They have left far too many Americans disconnected from what it means to be part of this republic. And I also discuss this period because, for the most part, it goes beyond the party politics of today. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about who we are as Americans, something that we seem to have forgotten. We need to know where we come from and where we want to go. It's a powerful reminder that our strength as a nation doesn't come from the politicians, doesn't come from the bureaucrats or the elite. It comes from ordinary people who understand what's at stake. Unfortunately, today, there are too many Americans that are clueless about our country, and so many have disengaged from the political process. It's why I try to bring to life the ordinary people who answered the call when their country needed them most. People who didn't seek fame or fortune, but they believed in something greater than themselves. Their stories remind us that the true power of America has always rested in the hands of its citizens, not the elites. And that preserving this republic requires each of us to do our part, and today is no different. And given that it's Italian Heritage Month, let me pose a question that flips our history books on the head. What if I told you one of the most important financiers of the American Revolution wasn't from Philadelphia, wasn't from Boston, not Virginia, but from a small village in Italy? Today, I am going to tell the story of Francesco Vigo, an immigrant who personally bankrolled the revolution's critical Western campaign that doesn't get talked about all that much. He risked everything for liberty, and in the cruel twist of fate, he died in obscurity, nearly broke. This isn't a story about debt. It's a story about duty, character, and civic virtue that feels so rare today. Francesco Vigo was born in Mondovì, Piedmont, in 1747. That's decades before Italy would even exist as a unified country. And little is known about his early life. We don't know much about him until he joined a Spanish regiment and was sent across the Atlantic, first to Cuba and then to New Orleans, which was then controlled by the Spaniards. Taking a page out of Sophia Petrillo, I want you to picture it. New Orleans, latter part of the 18th century, a chaotic, vibrant melting pot. French, Spanish, Native American, Creole, blacks, all these other cultures mixed on the humid delta. And this is where the young Vigo found his footing. He left the army around 1770, prior to the kickoff of the American Revolution. He moved north to become a fur trader, a merchant, and he wanted to go to St. Louis, which was also Spanish territory at the time. Now, the Mississippi River frontier was dangerous. It was an unpredictable area, but it was filled with opportunity. Traders like Vigo would navigate various Native American tribes. They would have to cross Spaniards and resistance from aggressive British agents. But Vigo was a pragmatic man. He was a shrewd businessman, and he was also idealistic. He saw in the American cause not chaos, but conviction. And for Vigo, liberty wasn't an American ideal. It was a way of life. In the year 1778, so now 2 years after the Declaration of Independence, the war rages in the East, but the British still hold firm on the vast territory north of the Ohio River, the Northwest Territory. We're talking modern-day Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. This territory held by the British and their Native American allies was a constant threat to the entire western frontier. And into this desperate landscape rides George Rogers Clark. He was a young Virginian leading a daring, almost suicidal campaign to drive the British out. Now, Clark's army was in bad shape. The soldiers were starving, they were underfunded, and they were desperate. They were skin and bones. That's how hungry they were, and the entire campaign was about to collapse. But that's when Francesco Vigo enters the scene. He meets Clark, and immediately recognizing the vital importance of the campaign, he becomes their lifeline. Vigo didn't just donate. He personally underwrote Clark's entire campaign on his own credit. He provided money, credit, clothing, gunpowder, food, all in exchange for promissory notes from the Virginia legislature, a promise of repayment at a later date that would not be defined. Now, think about the audacity of this. Private person, a merchant, placing his entire financial existence on the success of a struggling revolution across a perilous frontier, a revolution where victory was far from certain. And Vigo understood the risks. He knew if the Patriots lost, he would be ruined. But he believed in the cause so much. He believed it was so important, too important to ignore. And his commitment didn't stop with his wallet. I'm going to explain that when we get back from a quick break. So everyone, hang tight and we'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, remember, share this episode with your family and friends, rate it, review the podcast on any podcast platform that allows reviews, particularly Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's the best way to help us bring these forgotten stories to a bigger audience. And today we are telling the story of a great patriot that most people have never even heard of. And I'm talking about Francesco Vigo, the man who gave his fortune to the birth of a nation. And before the break, we left off with Vigo connecting with George Rogers Clark. Clark was someone that was on a campaign in the Western fronts trying to rout out the British, but he needed intelligence on the primary British stronghold. We're talking Fort Sackville. When we look at Fort Sackville in Vincennes, Vigo volunteered. He traveled to Vincennes to assess British strength, but was captured by the British commander, Henry Hamilton. And Henry Hamilton got the infamous nickname, the Hair Buyer. He earned this nickname from Clark because he was accused to have paid Native Americans bounties for the scalps of American settlers during the Revolutionary War. Now, Hamilton has always denied this, but the name stuck, the nickname stuck. When Vigo was taken into custody, he was interrogated. He was a foreign national, a Spanish subject. He was only released after promising to maintain strict neutrality. See, they couldn't hurt him, they couldn't kill him, because that would create problems with Spain. But they wanted to make sure that he stayed out of it. A promise, I might add, that Vigo broke as soon as he was free. Demonstrating true courage and unwavering commitment to the principles of independence, Vigo immediately warned Clark of British troop movements and the weaknesses of the garrison of the fort. That gave Clark the opportunity he needed, and while Clark's men marched through freezing swamps, soaked, starving, hungry, they moved with confidence because they trusted Vigo's information. They understood that Vigo knew what he was talking about. And Vigo, he gave them hope. He made them understand that victory was possible. Vigo's going to give them the target. He's going to give them the timeline. And Clark's going to execute. Clark's victory at Vincennes in early 1779 was one of the most decisive battles in the Western theater of war. It allowed the United States to successfully claim the entire Northwest in the 1783 Treaty of Paris. Without Vigo's financing, without his intelligence, Clark's campaign most likely fails. I don't see how he could have succeeded. And that failure would have meant that the British would still control significant strategic territory right up to our border. So even if we succeeded in the revolution, in the East, this massive armed hostile force would still remain on our soil. The hostile frontier would have set the stage, no doubt, for another conflict of war in due time, and that conflict would have most likely happened after the collapse of the Articles of Confederation. This was a war that could have destroyed the United States while it's in its infancy. So Vigo is one of the people that secured America's future reach. After the revolution, Vigo decides that he's going to settle in Vincennes, Indiana, a place that he personally helped secure. He continued to be a pillar of the new republic, not just as a successful merchant. He would donate his own money to veterans. He wanted to demonstrate his commitment to those who put their lives on the line, those who sacrificed so much. And he served as the first judge in Knox County. He also funded civic projects, schools, libraries, and even donated land for the establishment of Indiana University. He was the model of a dutiful, engaged citizen of America. And even though the government was supposed to pay him back for the amount of money he put into the revolution, unfortunately, the government couldn't. Vigo was owed tens of thousands of dollars in wartime reimbursements. This is a crippling amount for any individual, but especially an individual whose credit had been exhausted for the cause. He couldn't take any more money. He couldn't take out any more loans. Now, both Congress and Virginia acknowledged that they owed him this money, but they delayed payment year after year after year. And the reason that they had to delay the payment is because we were broke. You know, you look at the post-war financial chaos of the United States. The U.S. government, under the Articles of Confederation, was nearly insolvent. You had Virginia was broke. The debt became a bureaucratic nightmare, and they couldn't afford to pay him back at that time. In 1823, an elderly Vigo, who spent decades petitioning for what he was owed, he writes to Congress. He had advanced everything in his power to the cause of liberty. Unfortunately, his claim was still denied because we still couldn't afford it. Vigo's going to die 1836, nearly broke, but he's going to die a proud man. And I have little doubt that if he had to do it all over again, he would do exactly the same thing because of his profound belief in liberty. Even though his own government was unable to repay him at the time, Vigo never lost faith in the United States. He never lost faith in the Republic. He believed in the ideals of the revolution, and he understood that those ideals were much bigger than any one man, bigger than any single debt. It took until 1840 for his claim to be validated by the courts, and his estate finally received payment in 1876, 40 years after his death. The state of Indiana, however, they didn't forget Vigo. They named Vigo County in his honor, and eventually they erected a beautiful statue of him. Originally, a gift from the people of Italy was placed in Statutory Hall in the United States Capitol representing the state of Indiana. He stands facing a statue of George Rogers Clark, his old ally. Vigo never asked, "What's in this for me?" Throughout the Revolution, he always asked, "What's right for the Republic?" He didn't look to profit off the war. He saw the righteousness of the cause and how it would change the course of history. Imagine if we brought that mindset back today. The founders built a system that depends on people like Vigo, not celebrities or elites, but ordinary men and women who take it upon themselves to strengthen our nation. They didn't pawn off their civic duty, the civic responsibility on the government. Vigo understood that we all have a role to play. And if we don't get active in civics, if we don't exercise our responsibilities, then governments continue to grow and acquire more power at the expense of the people. That's what self-government demands of us even now. He didn't get a medal or a mansion, and he didn't care about monuments. What he got was debt and obscurity, and he still believed it was worth it. More Americans believe that today, especially our leaders, if they lived by the same principles of duty over reward. How much stronger would we be today as a nation? You know, Francesco Vigo may not appear in most textbooks, but his legacy does live every time Americans choose service over self. In the end, freedom isn't preserved by the famous or the politicians. It's preserved by the faithful. Now, I hope you found this episode interesting, and if you did, please give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating. Take 30 seconds, leave a review on any podcast platform that allows it, especially Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, please share this episode, because I want everyone to remember that America's greatness was built by ordinary people whose names history may sometimes forget, but there is little doubt that their spirit endures.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.